Hey, this is Amal from Leathercraft 209, TechLeatherCraft. In this video I want to take a few moments to talk about the Apple Watch. I know there's been a lot of press, a lot of comments, a lot of YouTube videos, basically slamming the watch. And don't get me wrong, there are lots of things wrong with the watch and lots of issues and different things. But in this video I want to focus on 5 positive things about the Apple Watch. Now, before anyone slams me, I am an Android user. I've always used Android. This is my Note 4 here. If you follow my channel, you know that. One of the things I want to talk about, and it is one of the 5 reasons, is that Apple has a large share of the market where they have a lot of say and a lot of control on kind of what the market trends. Now, in case anyone doubts that, a look at the new Samsung Galaxy S6 and some of the design cues that are in that new model, Apple does have pull. So in this video I want to talk about the 5 positive things about the Apple Watch. The first I already mentioned is market influence. Wearable tech such as the Samsung Gear that I have here, the Neo, and even my Moto 360, they're still kind of niche and they haven't caught on quite as much. So because of the market influence that Apple has, I do think that the smartwatch, kind of the wearable tech market, will catch on and start to grow a little bit faster compared to where it's been. And this is because Apple just has that kind of say. Like I said, if anyone doubts that, have a look at the Samsung S6. People are going to take design cues, user interface cues from the Apple Watch to kind of design the next generation of watches. This, of course, is if the Apple Watch does well. Of course, if it bombs, then probably not, but it is something to think about. So that's number 5. Number 4 is apps. Apple made a huge point in their announcement of talking about kind of full-featured apps, and while Samsung, which runs Tizen, does have its app store, and Android Wear has its app store also, they still have a lot of things to develop and still a lot of things to work out, and they are still kind of sparse. One of Apple's main strengths is its app development. And if you are an Android user and you've used Android for a while, you know that very often, especially when a new app comes up, it almost always comes out for an iPhone or iOS device, and then eventually it gets released for Android. Now, that's not always the case, and for a lot of the major apps like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all that stuff, I mean, obviously those are already kind of mainstream in both OSs, but there are definitely situations, and I can just think of maybe 3 or 4 just that happened in the last couple months that I was aware of. Adobe, for example, announced that it would be releasing Adobe Lightroom. It's for photographers that will do like raw editing. And one of the first things in the announcement was, well, it's coming to the iPad first, and at some point it will come to Android. One thing to be aware of is that the newer apps almost always get developed for iOS, for Apple, and then eventually get ported over or modified. So hopefully that is a benefit to Android users, for example, who run the Tizen or Android Wear, is that app development on wearable tech will start to develop a little bit nicer, a little bit faster, because of Apple's kind of push in the app department. So the next part I'll talk about is tiered pricing. Now, don't get me wrong, their pricing is off, I believe, personally. They probably need to drop it down $100 on all tiers. Well, a 3rd tier, then you should drop it down like $1,000 or whatever. Other smart watch makers do this. So, for example, Samsung on their Gear 2 released the Neo, which is the cheaper version, and then they have like the metal version, which is the Gear 2, they just call it. But, for example, the Moto 360, when it was first released, for example, it came in black, with black leather, and the stainless steel version with the gray, and the pricing was all the same. It was $250. Motorola has since expanded that, and they've added the Moto Maker, and they have watch band customization stuff on their website now. But when it was first released, and for a while, it was one price point, and that's what you got. And eventually, they released the stainless steel bracelets for it, and so then then became more options. So this is not something new that Apple is doing. But not all smartwatch makers do this. The LG G Watch R also is one version of it, kind of one tier, is one price. And so it is something that I think Samsung finally has nailed down. Pebble also does that. When Pebble first released its original kind of plastic Pebble, It was the only one in the market at that price point, and eventually they released the Pebble Steel. I do think having multiple price points is definitely a positive thing for Apple. Like I said, the pricing is off, but I do think that for people who want to get started in the smartwatch market, I think it is good and important to have, and it is something I hope that Samsung continues to do that which they're already doing, and that Motorola and LG with their round face watches hopefully expand on that, and it can kind of bring out multiple price points for different people for different budgets. Alright, so the tiered pricing, once again, I'm not saying that the pricing structure is right, but the fact that they have kind of a low end, mid end, and kind of the outrageous end, I guess. The next feature, and this is probably debatable, but it is a feature I use a lot on my Samsung Gear 2 Neo, and that is the ability to take calls. So in case you guys don't know, the Tizen OS, so the Samsung Gear 2, the Gear 2 Neo, and the Gear S, all are able to take calls. They have a little microphone built in here, a little speaker, and you can actually talk and place a call and talk on the watch. Now, I've heard a lot of people who are like, no one is going to do that. You're going to look silly doing that, etc. That is something they said about Bluetooth headsets when they first came out, that no one really wants to be walking around talking to themselves. And my take is because, as I mentioned earlier, because of Apple's ability to have so much market control, I think you're going to see more and more people talking to their watch. And as it is now, a lot of interactions that you do with Android Wear, even though it doesn't support the calling feature, you are talking to it a lot with the whole OK Google piece. So it is a really useful feature, and I will be posting a video about kind of 5 reasons or so to buy a smartwatch, and I'll kind of expand on that a little bit further. So if you're interested, you can go check out that video. I'll be posting it either before or after this video. But it is a feature that I think needs to come to Android Wear, if you don't use it, you don't use it, but it is really nice to have in case you need to use it, especially while you're driving. If you're someone who's used to that with Samsung, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you've only had Android Wear devices, then you probably don't see the value in it because you haven't actually used it. But it's once again one of those things where if you didn't have a smartwatch, you probably wouldn't see the value in smartwatches, at least right off the bat, until you've actually implemented it and used it. And having used the calling feature, I can tell you it does come in handy. So I do think that is definitely a positive for Apple, and I do think that Android Wear will probably eventually support that feature also. So the number one thing that Apple got right is introducing multiple sizes. And in case you guys missed it, they are offering a 42mm and a 38mm version of the watch. And both between the 38mm and the 42mm, the design and the functionality remains the same. For example, the 38mm is going to look identical in the casing and the material, depending on which version you buy, the aluminum on the stainless steel. It's going to look the same as the 42mm. Now, that is probably the only major kind of innovative thing in the Apple Watch that no other smartwatch maker is doing right now. I would say Pebble kind of came close to that because they had the Pebble, the original Pebble, the plasticky one, and then they released the Pebble Steel. But between the two, there was this huge difference in style between that. And all the other smartwatch makers right now, like the Moto 360 and Samsung, they're all really large, and that is probably the biggest complaint I hear when it comes to smartwatches and wearable tech, is from people with smaller wrists, with thin wrists, who the watch just doesn't look right in their wrist. It just looks out of place. And so I think Apple addressing that by introducing 2 sizes is a definite plus, and I do think that it's going to be a major selling feature for the 38mm, and I think there's going to be a larger market for that, which has not been captured by Samsung, by Android Wear, or even something like Pebble. Anyway guys, let me know what you think. So those are my top 5 positives about the Apple Watch. If there's anything I missed, please feel free to comment, and you can also comment on the negatives, but I am well aware of those. I just didn't touch on those because there are already several hundred videos talking about the things that are wrong with Apple Watch, and we kind of all know some of those things. I do think that Apple did get some things right, and I did want to, you need to give credit where credit's due. And part of the thing is that Apple has large amount of pull when it comes to the market and to the public. And what Apple does, I think, right anyway, will hopefully transfer over to the Android smartware devices such as Tizen or Android Wear, and that other companies will start to follow suit, assuming it's done right. So we'll see. Alright guys, if you like tech, if you like custom leather projects, subscribe to my channel. I will have a few videos coming up on my custom leather cuffs that I make for smartwatches. They have the cutout on the back. So that's for the Samsung Gear 2, and this is the cutout on the back for the Motorola 360. And of course I will probably have one for the Apple Watch. Alright guys, take care. I'll talk to you guys later.